Good afternoon, Dr. Narasimhan.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Fine, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. How are you, sir?
Very
Hi, how are you, Jaydeep? Thank you.
Very well, sir. Mr. Damodaran, good evening.
Afternoon ही हो गया. Good evening.
Afternoon. 5 more minutes to good evening.
47 degrees outside. 40.
It's very hot. So you are in Delhi, sir, and Bombay, sir. Good afternoon, sir. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon. I considered a suit. Then I decided that Friday afternoon, 47 degrees.
Yeah. you are joining from Delhi?
Yeah, Delhi.
Are you joining from? Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah.
Hello, Professor Bala.
Hello. Jaydeep, how are you?
Very well, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Oh,
We'll start in a few minutes. The attendees are joining in, and Suhas will also join in a minute. We'll get started.
How many do you have?
So we've received more than 300 registrations, but people also join in at the last minute. And plus, we've got the session going on YouTube Live. So we have some people watching on YouTube as well.
Okay.
I think I'll fall in line and take my jacket off.
It's very hot, sir. I did not consider suit at all, sir. Yes.
No, I understand. Well, it's accustomed to this kind of dress for meetings and lectures and things like that. So, as a reaction, normally one just puts on these things.
Sir.
Yeah.
So, sir, what's the situation in Delhi like? Looks like
Number of cases has increased.
correct.
So we don't know.
Sorry?
Number of cases has increased. So we really don't know.
Number of cases.
Yeah.
We need to learn to live with Corona, sir. I don't think we can escape it now.
Pardon?
We have to learn to live with it instead of.
I think so. Yes, I absolutely agree with you. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon.
How are you?
Good afternoon. How are you, sir? How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Afternoon. Very well. How are
Good
you?
afternoon.
All well, sir.
Suhas is looking very fresh, like he's just out of a European holiday.
Thank you, sir. I thank you very much. We're trying to kind of remain as fresh as possible.
So you have over 300 is what Jaydeep was saying.
JD?
Yes. We'll have the audience split across Zoom and YouTube.
Okay, and how have questions started coming in already?
Hold on, just give me a second. None as yet,
Okay.
but I'm sure they'll pour in.
Yeah. Yes, Suhas had sent one question or suggestion from somebody who had written an article. I think it was Mr. Anand about half-yearly accounts instead of quarterly accounts. But we can take that perhaps as part of the Q&A.
Professor, I first spoke about this 12 years ago in the Indian School of Business and wrote about it twice, including 4 years ago in our newsletter. So I'm happy to see the issue resurfacing.
Sir, I was browsing through the disclosures made on the National Stock Exchange BSE, sir. All the companies are very shy in disclosing. They're saying we will file in due course. We had an impact. We are trying to protect the employee. We are not doing a pay cut. Only those companies that have not done pay cut or a job cut, they have said it in loud words, but most of them are very shy, sir. They're trying to, use English to camouflage and cover things. They're not just opening up in spite of fairly strict circular from SEBI, sir.
I don't know, Dr. Narasimhan, whether you have seen those boards in the restaurants in smaller towns. As you leave, there is a board which says, If you're happy, tell us. If you're unhappy, tell us. If you're happy, tell your friends.
Okay.
Yeah, that used to be the old Bata Shoe Company's sales pitch.
That is right.
Olden days, Bata Shoe Company, you will always have that board there. Happy, tell your friends. We are not happy, tell us. Yes, very good punchline it was.
I remember seeing this in restaurants when you come outside after paying.
Oh.
As you're coming out in small standalone restaurants in small towns.
Very true.
No, sir, interestingly, what we have done, we have actually started creating a standard form impact assessment through a software solution. Although we are saying that, let's say, if your plant was in Tamil Nadu, okay, what could its probable impact be? Because when did the lockdown open up?
That's right, yes.
Compared to what happened in Maharashtra, compared to what happens in other locations.
Yes.
See, for example, we have Tata Steel as a client, and there are thousands of locations where they are situated. We know how many units are there with Tata Steel. So we are seeing for each unit, what were the COVID directions applicable, and how you were affected, whether it is from supply chain perspective, whether it is from actually your manufacturing capability. We're trying to create a kind of standard form in trying to understand what the impact could be. We looked at what the Harvard Law Corporate Governance article talked about in terms of how do you assess the impact. And we had those old formulas as a lawyer that we used to apply on material adverse effect, material adverse condition. How do you kind of look at valuation going up and down? So we're trying to create something whereby you can look at on two broad angles, which is degree of your disability is what I call, I mean broadly how it affects you, and the intensity of affliction of the virus. Because I had used these two parameters while I was student in Bhopal gas tragedy and tried to quantify what was the corporate liability of UCC, Union Carbide Corporation in West Virginia, because the eventual decision making went there.
That's right, yes.
So we use these two statistical parameters. So I'm trying to grapple with it and see whether we can help some of our clients to do it objectively, rather than merely saying, yes, we are affected, but we don't know what the impact is.
That's actually worrying fact that people are not able to quantify the impact, or they are at least shy in saying what's the impact. Either way, if they know it, they are not saying it, or they may not be knowing. We have no idea.
No, because if they disclose it to an exchange, there is a finality about that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Therefore, it might not be an evil intent, but it could be so that once you sign off, then it's all over. No?
Yeah.
Come back to haunt you if it is incorrect.
Yeah.
So we looked at, let's say, Mr. Ashwath Damodaran's, equity risk premium or discount, what you call, with respect to COVID, and we looked at that formula. It's very interesting. He kind of predicts almost about 30% downturn in the valuation, and therefore how much and what its impact should be is through actually an Excel formula. He demonstrates, but it's based in the US kind of parameters today and how US companies are getting affected on COVID. Because the US SEC is categorical in pushing the companies to say that we want quantified impact. We don't want your vague statements any longer.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting aspect. I mean, in sense.
So what are the timelines like? We go up to what time?
So we have a 2-hour block, but we can do 1 hour of discussion followed by 20-30 minutes of Q&A, and if panel permitting and audience willing, we can continue.
Okay.
I think we've got a substantive audience in both on Zoom and YouTube. So with your permission, we can get started.
I think so. I just noticed Shailesh Haribhakti has joined.
Yes, sir was one of the first ones to tell that he would be attending this. Welcome, Haribhakti, sir. All right. Very good evening to all of you. Legasis is a leader in the space of compliance, risk governance, transparency, and ethics. We provide legal solutions to over 1,200 entities across 60 countries. I'm pleased to welcome you to a very exciting knowledge session today. Good evening, everyone. I am Jaideep Kevalramani, CEO of Legasis, your host for the evening. A few hygiene points before we start. Please do not click on any links shared on the chat box for your own data security. Please post your questions on the Q&A panel. And this session is not to be construed as any type of legal advice or otherwise. A crisis never announces its arrival. However, our preparations should be such that when bad times come, we should be able to stand firm. Tough times do not last, but tough people do. Enough and more has been said about these times: unprecedented, global event, black swan, bear market, and so on. We'll not talk about that. But how about we shift the perspective a little bit? Can we use this as an opportunity? An opportunity to reinvent, retool, reimagine the way we do businesses. Guiding, directing, and governing an organization during these times is a challenge that will need a greater measure of wisdom than bravado. The board of directors are a key stakeholder for ensuring good governance. The real test for any company would be to stand by its purpose and sustainability. It is actually for the board of directors of a company to provide leadership with utmost and self-confidence to survive these tough times. In this webinar, we focus on corporate governance best practices the board could adopt to ensure continuity of business, crisis management, and sustainability. I'm delighted to present and introduce a panel whose reputation stands tall like the Himalayas. I'll first welcome our moderator for the evening, Suhas Tujapurkar, who is the founder and director of Legacy Services and managing partner of Legacy Partners. Welcome, Suhas. Suhas has worked as an in-house counsel with companies like Blue Dart, SR, and Enron. He is a member and on the managing committee of several bodies like United Nations Global Compact Network of India, ISACA, Global Tourism Council, the Maratha Chambers. He's a trustee on the TRAIN, which is the Trust for Retail and Retail Association of India, and a member of the Blockchain Council. Welcome again, Suhas.
Thank you.
I'd like to now welcome Dr. Narasimhan. Good evening, sir. Dr. Narasimhan has more than 39 years of work experience in financial and capital markets in India. He started his career as a lecturer before moving to the Andhra Pradesh State Finance Corporation, where he led the computerization of accounts. This we are talking about many, many decades ago. He was also deputed to the Public Enterprise Management Board and the State Film Development Corporation of Government of Andhra Pradesh. In '92, he joined the capital market regulator SEBI as division chief, the secondary markets. In '96, he joined India's first securities depository, that is the National Securities Depository Limited, NSDL. During his stint with NSDL, he was responsible for spreading the DMAT concept amongst all issuers and investors in this country. Later in 2006, he joined the Kotak Mahindra Group and played multiple roles. In 2013, he joined as the first Chief Regulatory Officer of the National Stock Exchange and retired from that post in April 2018. As a member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, he plays an active role in the academic activities and contributes articles to the professional journal. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. Jaideep.
I now welcome Dr. N. Balasubramanian, professor, fondly called as Professor Bala. With more than 60 years of work experience behind him, Professor Bala has a unique blend of exposure to industry and academia that is not too common to come by. He spent 35 years across senior and board level responsibilities in companies like Imperial Chemical Industries, Britannia, and Wipro, which are complemented by 25 years of teaching and research activities at IIM Ahmedabad and IIM Bangalore. He has been on statutory and advisory boards of several listed and unlisted companies, served as a member of the government-sponsored National Advisory Committee on Accounting Standards, on the CII's National Council of Corporate Governance, is on the advisory committee of the NSE Center for Excellence in Corporate Governance, is also an Indian government committee on the Indian Government Committee on Corporate Excellence through Governance. He serves on the editorial and advisory boards of several Indian and international scholarly journals. He has designed and delivered training programs for several hundred incumbent and aspiring directors of public and private sector corporations. He has authored several books and research papers. His latest book, The Bhishma Way, Ancient Dharma for Modern Business and Politics, has won accolades from both practitioners and academicians in the field of governance. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And our third panelist for the evening, Mr. Damodaran, Chairperson of Excellence Enablers Private Limited. Thankful to Excellence Enablers to co-host this event with us. Mr. Damodaran is the former chairman of SEBI, UTI, and IDBI. Mr. Damodaran has held a number of important positions in the central and state governments and in India's financial sector, including the chairman of SEBI, chairman of UTI, chairman of IDBI, also the chief secretary of government of Tripura. While at SEBI, he was elected chairman of 80-member Emerging Markets Committee of the International Organization of Securities Commission. After successful stints at UTI and IDBI, where he led the turnaround efforts, and at SEBI, where he introduced improved corporate governance practices, he has set up Excellence Enablers Private Limited, a corporate governance and a board advisory consultancy firm. His pioneering role in promoting corporate governance in India invests EEPL with an experience-based leadership role in corporate governance advisory work. In addition, he is presently a consultant, advisor, coach, and mentor, and sits on boards of some leading companies, as well as on the advisory boards of some foreign entities. He was the founder chairman of IIM Tiruchirappalli. Welcome, sir. And without much ado, I'll hand it over to Suhas to lead us into the excellent discussion that lies ahead of us. Over to you, Suhas.
Thank you very much, JD. Good evening to everybody. Welcome to this webinar. Thanks a lot to all the three celebrity panelists that we have today. I mean, India's corporate governance is in safe hands. Once you look at these three persons who are accompanying me, I am nobody in this process. I'm just going to facilitate some discussion and talk, which would probably give us the confidence as we move forward during a very crisis that everybody is saying there is no other crisis like this. And therefore, while during normal times itself, the discussion about corporate governance hovered around whether it was meant for only elite boys and for the companies that did very well. In the troubled times when everybody is struggling, each business entity, whether it's trust, partnership, company, listed entity, whether it's multinational, everybody is struggling. And during this struggle phase, I would like to understand from each one of you as to what your opening remarks on COVID crisis is, and how do we look at corporate governance in this sphere at this point in time. I'm going to start off with Dr. Narasimhan, then move on to Professor Bala, and then move on to Damodaran sir. And I'm going to, for the short of brevity, please permit me, I'm going to call Dr. Narasimhan Doctor, Professor Bala Professor, although I know he's also PhD and Doctor. And sir, I'm going to call Mr. Damodaran as a sir for brevity's sake, so that we can kind of navigate very easily. Please pardon me for doing this. Thank you very much once again, and welcome to a very, very invigorating discussion for next about 1 hour.
Thank you, Suhas, and good afternoon to the esteemed co-panelists, Professor Bala and Mr. Damodaran sir. I at the outset thank Legacies for giving us an opportunity to be a part of this webinar. we would like to share some of the thoughts on corporate governance, as Suhas has put it. Whether the corporate governance.
Sorry to bother you. I think I must say this is hosted by Excellence Enablers and Legacies together.
Oh, my apologies. Sir Damodaran sir, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be on the Excellence, your esteemed organization, sir. I'm very thankful to you. Okay. The question is, in these COVID times, whether corporate governance tenets will undergo any change, or are they relevant anymore, or do you have to have a new look towards corporate governance is a question that comes to everybody's mind. My personal view is that corporate governance tenets do not undergo any change. Business ethics, accountability, oversight, transparency, disclosure, all are there at the same place. Only thing is the way in which they are getting operated now probably will undergo some change is what we have got to understand. The first and foremost thing a board may have to do today is assessing what is lost and what it takes to revive. There are small words to use, but then there are a lot of questions behind this. Say, to understand what is lost in a comprehensive analysis, we have to look at both inward chain and outward chain in terms of what is lost in that. The impact of migrant laborers, that is, until we saw these numbers of migrant laborers, we never understood the contribution of migrant laborers to the industry and commercial life that we have in our country. What is the impact of migrant labor, especially on the physical and manual work that happens in various institutions and entities? And potential change of consumer behavior is something we have got to understand in terms of their spending preferences, in terms of choices to visit the shops and dealerships, etc. They may undergo a change that we have got to have understanding. Usability of raw materials been lying there for about 2-3 months unused, status of finished goods, and so on and so forth. In all these questions, board's role is not to get into operational activity, but more to raise the appropriate questions to be able to put management to take right questions. If you pull up your sleeves, then get into operational mode, you stop to be board of directors. Your oversight responsibility will get lost. And therefore, my view is that you should prompt the management to ask the right kind of questions so that they will ask whatever questions has to be asked. One little question that we've got to be very wary of as a board of directors is that there will be a huge informational gap. Information gap at the management level itself, because how much they could understand the field reality is suspect today, because management is not able to visit various plants that they have around the country. They have to go by what the field people have said. Field people have different understanding of what's there on hand, and management perspective of looking at the resources is totally different. To the extent there could be an information gap at the management level. As there's an information gap at the management level, what is that they're going to kick up and tell the board is again a question. Therefore, again, board has to be alert and asking right type of questions to be able to have a proper perspective of the problem. I'm not saying that there are no problems. I'm not saying that we have to keep questioning the management. I'm saying help the management to ask the right kind of questions. Board has to be sympathetic. Board has to be cooperative. Board has to be playing the leader's role exactly now, not to hold the management for the strategic target that have been set in the last, which they are approved. You can't hold them for those short-term and medium-term goals anymore. Everything will go for a change. Budgets may have to be revisited. Everything will undergo a complete change, and therefore we've got to look at it. And my view is that transparency is important in corporate governance, but corporate transparency internal is first and then external. Let us try to understand internally. Let us communicate to the existing shareholders, whatever has to be communicated. Then go and tell the potential customers, potential shareholders. Transparency doesn't mean that we should be talking something on which we don't have full confidence. Let us understand it fully. Only then we have got to talk to the outside world is my view on this. And then the two committees, which are generally considered as paper committees today, will have to be activated. The stakeholders committee will have to play a very active role. Stakeholders here would mean vendors. Stakeholders means employees. Stakeholders means dealers. Stakeholders means customers. Each one has been impacted in different ways in this COVID, and therefore stakeholders committee, which is a paper committee all these days, has to be actually activated. Similarly, NRC has to be very sympathetic in understanding and assessing the performance of the management, and they also have to be equally discerning quite possibly that there are some people who would like to push their inefficiency under the COVID carpet now. Therefore, they have got to take a balancing role, saying that, okay, this area of difficulty is because of the COVID, and this area of difficulty is because of personal contribution. That kind of balance has to come. It actually, I feel that board has to play a actual true leadership role today, and guiding role today is my personal view. These are my initial remarks.
Thank you very much, sir. I think thanks for laying the land, as I would put it. I'm going to request Professor Bala, because I think, sir, the boards are facing challenges today. First is, of course, the survival part of it. The second is in terms of protecting whatever the company today has and continuing to look at business. From that perspective, sir, I would request for your overview, the initial remarks, and how do we kind of look at corporate governance in these times and probably post-COVID. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Narasimhan, for the excellent introduction to the lay of the land. When I think about COVID and its impact on companies and boards in particular, I'll try and restrict myself to boards and directors more than the actual management, what they should be doing, etc. So we can share these topics among ourselves. The first thought that came to my mind was went back to 250 years to Robert Malthus, who wrote an essay on population, and he said population and food have to balance each other over time, and if food cannot be produced at the same pace as the population increases, nature will ensure that population will come down, meaning by war or famine or pestilence or whatever it is, various reasons he gave, possibilities. He wrote this in 1798, if I remember right. And I think that's what's going to happen to my mind. This is a kind of pestilence that has come to impact the societies, and corporations are parts of society, so for impact the society as well. I think some companies, I'm afraid, are going to disappear, or they're going to be very heavily impaired. And there may be some companies which will prosper in this also. I think there are some industries, for example, the pharmaceutical industry or medical and healthcare industries, hospitals, they may have a boom time. Perhaps if somebody finds a vaccine or something, it's going to be fantastic for them. So that's one side of it. I mean, it is no doubt a very major catharsis as far as I can see. So where does the board stand on this? There are 2 or 3 points which I would like to make briefly. I can supplement it afterwards as we go along. One is boards may have to see whether the existing businesses of companies are they relevant anymore? There may be industries which are not relevant, products and services which are not relevant in a revised situation. And if that is so, is there a need for the company to go back to the drawing table and then see what alternative areas we can consider, so that the facilities that have been installed, how they can be adapted to use for some other lines of business which can be more in demand. I'll give you an example of the many manufacturing companies in the US during wartime. Suddenly, US found that they were absolutely short of war planes and ammunition. And the national request at the time was companies should stop their normal, whatever they were producing, and as far as possible, change over and produce what is required for the war effort. And in a matter of 2 or 3 months, many of them were able to change over, each one contributing in their own way to do that. That also meant that they can do that. In a situation like what we are facing now, if some companies are going to find their products and services out of become redundant, I think that's one thing I think boards will have to seriously consider along with their executive management. The second challenge is the kind of threats that are happening that they will have to face, I would like to lay emphasis on the human capital side. On the human capital side, what is the threats that the companies are going to be facing? We talked about NRC or the Corporate Governance Committee the companies have won. I think one of the first things that they have to do now, they are not done already, is to sit down and identify the top executives, the key management personnel, and then see, do we have a backup plan? What happens if the CEO or the MD or if a very key scientist suddenly falls sick and he is out of action for some time? Do we close the company? Do we close the lines? So who should be the backup and get ready for that kind of a situation? Hope that it doesn't happen. We all pray that nothing happens to. So far, no major politicians or CEOs or anybody has been affected. God has been kind that way. We'll continue to pray that it continues that way. But if it happens, what do you do? That kind of a contingency planning may be something that boards will have to pay attention to. The third thing is about themselves, the board of directors themselves. I think especially the independent directors, the non-executive directors, not being involved in day-to-day management, generally have been treated very benevolently by courts of law and all that kind of thing, saying they're not part of day-to-day management. So unless they were partly colluding with the management or something other in case of litigation, they have been having a relatively relaxed treatment. I think that's likely to change. I foresee this happening already in the US. I think there are 2 or 3 instances which have come to my notice in the last couple of months, where even standard classic judgments like what we had in the care mark about the duties of care and duty of loyalty and all that kind of thing, the guidelines that courts have established and we have been following all this time, they tend to be revisited to say, question now is, did the board know is not the question anymore? Did they get what they ought to get is now beginning to be asked as a question. It applies to disclosures, it applies to mission-specific critical processes, internal control systems. If something is being flagged to the board, whether they are looking at it, what actions they have taken, have they applied their mind, things like that, which I thought were handled in a very relaxed fashion so far. I think that regime probably will undergo a change. I have some suggestions, but I think I'll keep it for later. What the boards can do, in my humble opinion, to tide over these difficulties. Maybe after Mr. Damodaran also has had his initial comments, I'll come back if there is a time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think we kind of setting the tone in a very, very focused manner around COVID, because what you mentioned, sir, is that you're saying, look at the relevance of your business, look at what are the, from there onwards to what are the challenges of the board that are facing on the corporate governance issues, and it will, as you kind of predicting, it will be more prominent now as we move forward. I'm going to request, sir, Mr. Damodaran, to kind of look at this COVID situation and the governance.
Thank you, Suhas. I think you made life a lot easier and hopefully looking a little brighter, because you started by saying that the 3 of us would be referred to as Doctor, Professor, and Sir. In Queen Elizabeth's long tenure, I have not been knighted. I haven't come close to being knighted. This is the only time, so thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think the comments of both the panelists who've come in before me have, in some sense, captured most of the important issues that need to be addressed. And therefore, what I will do is to look at whether anything at all has changed in the space of governance post-COVID-19. To do that, let me get to basics. What is corporate governance? We need to understand that before we look at whether corporate governance has changed, needs to change, needs to be tweaked, refined, etc. None of that needs to be done because corporate governance is a set of values. Corporate governance is good conduct. Corporate governance is good corporate behavior. And it is not the same thing as compliance. The problem is that most discussions and debates tend to get derailed because people treat governance and compliance as the same thing. They're not. Many of the participants in this must have at some stage played chess. So let me give you an analogy from chess. Compliance is playing black pieces. The regulator or the lawmaker says something and you respond. It's not something you do on your own. Governance is playing white pieces. Nobody's prompting you. You are making some moves because you think they are the right moves in the interest of all stakeholders. And therefore, let me also say this. Compliance is a non-negotiable threshold condition for getting into the larger space called governance. If you are not compliant, Dr. Narasimham's NSC would not have listed you or continued to list you. He would have shown you the door or at least fined you and earned some money for the exchange. But life would have been difficult if you're non-compliant. Governance is a choice. You can choose to be a good person or a bad person. And that's, if I may paint on a slightly larger canvas, what is the purpose of law? The purpose of law is to ensure that bad people conduct themselves properly as the state and society want them to. The good people don't need the law. So you behave well because you're basically good, or you behave well because of what the British called the fear of the policeman at the elbow. Because there is somebody just behind you and you could get wrapped for it, therefore you behave well. So governance has not changed, will not change. Values are eternal. There could be some articulation of principles based on values that might undergo change, but values, which is the substratum, that is absolutely eternal, and there is no need to worry that it will go away because of COVID or because of anything else. I also want to address one other issue straight away and then get to present times, which is, and there has been this discussion all along, so if governance is not compliance, then what is governance? We have coined an explanation in Excellence Enablers, which is very simple. We are simple people, so we have a simple explanation. We said that it is doing the right things in the right manner for the right reasons and at the right time. That is all there is to it. There is no fifth element to govern. So if you look at that, the other explanation that I tell people is that if you are violating something in the space of compliance, you look to the regulator or the lawmaker to hold you to account. If you're violating a principle of governance, the person that holds you accountable is the one that you see when you look into the mirror. That is your judge, that is your jury. And you will find that that is a far more difficult judge and or jury to explain to. Now, coming to the role of boards, it's interesting that, we bring out monthly newsletters, and the one that we brought out last month was exactly the role of boards in COVID times. What should they do? What are they doing? And what should they avoid doing? Professor Bala touched on the point, don't get into operational areas. That's not your area as a board. I don't think boards are even equipped to. But the temptation is, when something like COVID happens and business gets hugely disrupted, your plants get shut, your offices get shut. If you're living in Delhi and want to attend an office in Gurgaon, you can't go. There is a barrier there which prevents you from going. So in that kind of a situation, what should boards do? The first is to recognize the relationship between board and management. I call it a continuing constructive conversation. That is what these two elements need to have. A continuing constructive conversation. What is it that goes into that conversation? It is that the boards that are tasked with the duties of superintendence, direction, and control, these are the only three jobs of boards, challenge the management to perform as well as the management can. Challenge does not mean getting into a boxing ring and pointing out faults and knocking the management down. Far from that. I think these are times when you need to understand, you need to get management's viewpoints, see whether that is what you would have done had you been there, but not jump into the ring in a conversation that is not patronizing, but elder brotherly. You can point out to management the alternatives that it needs to look at. Managements will not feel threatened. There are some boards which have adopted a very happy position. As soon as COVID came and its impact was felt and the nature and dimensions of the problem got known, board members just pulled back and said, in the best of times, these guys didn't think we were adding any value. Why should we get in their way? Complete disengagement. There were some other boards, especially where you have former CEOs sitting on boards. The tendency to roll up your sleeves, get in, and I've heard this said a few times in non-COVID situations. I'm sure it's happening more now. Jab main CEO tha is not the answer today. Second guessing is not the answer. Just see what today's CEO is doing. There's only one CEO. There's only one managing director. And then handhold that person. This is a time for handholding. This is a time, as was rightly stated, for empathy. This is a time for adding value, not for knocking somebody down. And this is a time to address the two major issues that governance has thrown up. There are only two problems in corporate governance. I will never tire of saying this. One is conflict of interest and the other is asymmetry of information. Conflict of interest, whether it's COVID, non-COVID, has to be rooted out of the system the minute you see it. But as far as asymmetry of information is concerned, there will always be contextual asymmetry because somebody is an operations person, somebody is a person who comes in 3 times or 4 times in a year, maybe 5 times, and gets such information as is given to him or her. Now that asymmetry has got worse during COVID times because managements are understandably busy with keeping the ship afloat and do not have time to share as much information as they would have had in normal times. Don't hold them to account for that. Don't say that, 6 months ago you told us this. 6 months ago, the world didn't know of COVID. I don't know whether the Chinese knew. The rest of us certainly didn't know about COVID 6 months ago. So I don't think we should hold them accountable for that. And the boards that mature, wise people, I keep saying that managements are the seat of knowledge, board is the seat of wisdom. If you're mature, wise people, you will actually be in a situation where managements will reach out to you in order to benefit from your experience, from your expertise, rather than wait for you to volunteer advice that may be contextually irrelevant or outdated. One last thought before I stop, and this is, and Professor Bala touched on this, the role of independent directors, the likely threat to independent directors, no matter what happens in other jurisdictions, and I'm stating this without any hesitation, your liability as an independent director for something that might have gone wrong would depend on the mood in which the judge is on that particular day when your case comes up. There have been judges that have not allowed 149.12 to be even mentioned in the court, saying we are not concerned. There are others who have said that so what, if even if forget independent directors, even a person is a managing director, he couldn't have been around everywhere to prevent something going wrong. So you've had both kinds of judges. So it's less a function of law, it's a more a function of luck, depending on whether you would be held accountable. I had discussions when the Irani committee report was being written with Dr. Irani, and I did mention to him that you must insist that what the board ought to know is important, not what the board gets to know. 149.12 is what the board gets to know through a process with the sting in the tail, and the one that will hurt much worse than a scorpion is, or if he had not been diligent.
Yeah.
That is the one that will be interpreted by sub-inspectors of police to determine who was diligent and not diligent with the benefit of hindsight. And everything will be judged on the basis of outcome, not on the basis of the process that you followed, the legality or the robustness. Things can go wrong, and then you will be held to account. So I think it's important to recognize, let me say this and stop. It's important to recognize that corporate governance is a necessary ingredient for a company's sustainable performance. It will never be a sufficient ingredient. You need to have products, you need to have markets, you need to have the right pricing, you need to have all of that. But without this, you will find some falling by the wayside. Maybe when the postmortems are done, when an analysis is done post-COVID, for as many as failed on account of economic reasons, you will find as many that came up short because they were found wanting in the governance space. I'll say that and stop for now.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thanks for that outlay there. And I think there are two or three things which are emerging, which I'm struggling with, and that's where I'm going to kind of come back to you again. Is one, you talked about information symmetry and information gap that's emerging. I think Dr. Saab, Professor, both of them talked a bit about it. Dr. Saab articulated it to mean that, if you have a factory today at a remote place, the local on the field management guy knows the information better, and how does that get translated to board information? Sir, we're seeing, at least in COVID situation, that there is this information gap is increasing. Not because we are working from home, but because otherwise, for everything that you're asking today, I think what is being thrown at you is to say that, hey, we are in extraordinary situations today. Uh, it's very difficult for us to assess what is on the ground today, whether it's impact or whether it's functioning, how our employees are. To an extent, sir, when it so happened in one of the pharma companies in Mysore, that because of the COVID situation, almost overnight 31 workmen were tested COVID positive, and the plant had to eventually shut down. But when I think the management started asking questions about it, I think it was completely stonewalled as to where this probable infection or contagion started from. Was it raw materials coming from China? Was it anything else? The second incidence that I would like to look at is the LG situation that happened, and it was a la Bhopal kind of a tragedy on a smaller scale. Although it was styrene and not methyl isocyanate, the two different chemicals there. But the fact remains that plant was being taken for maintenance, and I think again the pneumatic valve leaked and small quantity of water entered, etc., etc. But whenever I think it was Parliament tried to kind of do something about it, Supreme Court did it, NGT tried to say that we want to now get the information. But what was thrown there is that COVID situation is preventing us from uh, having this information correctly available. So I'm going to kind of request, Sir, Mr. Damodaran, in terms of this information gap increasing. So what are the right questions for the board to ask? I mean, as you rightly said, somebody is going to look at it with the benefit of hindsight and said, say that, why didn't you ask right question? So in this situation, one is the information gap increasing, therefore information asymmetry will be a huge question mark. And then looking at it to say, what should I be asking in today's circumstances as either the independent director, non-executive director, or on the board?
Let me start with the point that you made about the local manager having knowledge, nobody above him having knowledge. In a situation of lockdown, the only person who has knowledge is the guard standing outside the security gate, because he might get a chance to go inside, nobody else will. So the source of information itself has changed, because if the source is not there, the information cannot originate, it cannot flow, cannot be communicated. There are situations in which managements cannot get information. I think it's a matter of looking at it in some detail. There are situations where COVID will be used as a shield. For example, I don't know enough about the LG plant, but it's useful for somebody to ask, was this an issue of preventive maintenance not having taken place prior to COVID? Was that what played out when the leakage took place? Somebody could ask that question. So to your question about what should boards be asking, the number of things boards should ask. Let's take, for example, human resources, and that's important. Everybody says work from home. To the extent you can, people have been enabled to work from home. Companies have started making announcements, we have now reconfigured the way we will work post-COVID, whenever that is. 30% will work out of home. Now, have you asked those 30% guys, are they happy working out of home? Many of them, especially in the large metros, are finding it extremely difficult to work. Working out of an office, working out of home is different. I will give you a very interesting example, not to do with work. There was an inquiry going on, there still is, an inquiry into a case of Posh, where the complainant was working out of home, and during the inquiry, which was post-COVID, she was asked, are you in a position to give us your version of what happened? She said, no, I'm not. Wait till the lockdown lifts and I get to office. I can't talk to you here. Why? Because there are family members who might get to know that she was in some kind of difficulty. She might not have told them that. So work from home is not a kind of magic wand that you will say, I will reduce the space my office occupies, I'll keep a bunch of guys home. But have you talked to the employees? Conversation is a two-way situation. And I know the good companies have done extremely participative town halls, asking people that, virtual town halls, asking people, what are you guys doing? What more do you want us to do? The other is the mental and physical health, both of which need to be addressed. So one set of issues that need to be addressed by the board, or at least looked into by the board. So ask management, are you doing enough, or have you done enough to see that the mental and physical health of your workforce is looked after? And many of them are doing well. There have been counseling arrangements that have been set in place, and I'm told people are taking advantage of those. There is no problem with that. The other is, and there was mention made by Dr. Narasimham about the materials lying unused, what will be the impact of it as and when lockdown gets over. There are financial implications, unpaid bills, which you're unable to pay because there's no money coming into your account. The board should ask these questions not with a view to fault finding, but keeping themselves informed so that should they have any suggestions, they should be in a position to pass that on. Information asymmetry will always be there, but contextually in COVID times, it has increased. Two reasons. One, who is to give the information that person doesn't have, who should have normally given. Two, if the person has what passes for information, he or she wants to know whether this is right before passing it on. COVID is a big enough problem. Why create a bigger one by passing on unverified information? So that verification process will also take a little time. But boards, I think, need to be seen as empathetic, compassionate, not abandoning the questioning role, but you can always question assertively without being aggressive.
Very well said. Very well said. Yeah.
Very well said. Dr. Saab, can I kind of take your views on this, the information asymmetry gap and what to do?
Actually, Damodar sir has covered the whole pitch actually, but I only can give some more illustrations in terms of what could be the informational gaps which management itself may not be knowing, and therefore they are not able to pass it on to the board. And as sir said rightly, the role of board here is to prompt management to ask the right kind of questions. For example, I'm a manufacturer and depending on some component suppliers, and the component supplier supplies components to several people. And one of my competitors or other users of the same component has financially helped the vendor, and therefore the vendor's loyalties have tilted toward that person and not to me, because I'm a very small level customer. Therefore, he may not want to supply the component anymore to me. That could be a critical component. Have we asked about vendors' welfare at all? And then on the other side, on the sales side, the number of dealers that have gone out, we have seen several TV interviews wherein the manufacturer said that 20% of my dealers will go out of business. They are not viable anymore. They may not be interested to continue. We have seen some paper news where they said that a dealer now started selling fruits on the street because he's not able to continue to do the same work all over again. The financial calamity on the other side, on the dealership side also is a big problem, due to which the management may be shy to report this into the board because they think that they have not managed the dealers well. That could be one worry they have, either because of hiding their earlier difficulties in vendor and dealer management, they don't want to say, or they would not have asked all the questions, and most importantly, they may not have the information that's actually happening in the field. In all these situations, there's a huge the management itself will be falling short of information, and what will they tell the board? And therefore, board should say, as he said rightly, be sympathetic, be assertive, don't be probing, but alert them in terms of getting quite kind of information. It's quite possible in this tension, in this what you call overwhelming problem, it's quite possible that management is not able to ask all types of right questions, and therefore feed them with the questions which they're able to go back into the field and get the information. That's how we'll be playing a team role, a cooperative role, and a leading role. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you, sir. Professor Saab, I'm going to come back to you with a specific issue here on the information. When we talk about the fiduciary duties, you see, duty of care and duty of extra care, both are probably triggered during this time at COVID-19 situation. So there is duty of care and there is duty of extra care because we are saddled with material adverse event here. Now, couple that with the information gaps that are there. Some of them are like, COVID-19 as being the shield there to not be transparent. Some of it is naturally occurring. In this situation, how does one discharge your duty of care and duty of extra care?
That's a fantastic question. Let me attempt to answer it. I don't know whether I have the full answer to that. What we expect from the board, it really goes to that. In our discussion now, we seem to imply that the management may be not sharing information, may not be doing what ought to be done, and the outside directors or non-executive directors what role they should play. That's all fine, but I think to ensure, we should also realize that board of directors, when the directors on the board are not expected to be supermen or women. Right. They are also expected to be normal people, given their experience, their exposure, their qualification, their station in life. With that, would a similar person with the same thing, what could he have done? Whether these people are doing or not is a reasonable way to look at it. So one of the things I would, this takes me to the point I made in the beginning of some of the solutions or some of the possible answers is to have a COVID committee. This has been recommended in some places, and I'm not recommending it myself, but have a special COVID committee of the board, just for 2 or 3 directors who can be in frequent or day-to-day contact with the management and guide them, to the extent that they can, and keep the other directors informed every week or something like that, so that they don't hear about something from the outside, the next door neighbor or in a social media post or something like that. They get to know it from the company itself, from their own people. The COVID committee chair or the CEO can circulate maybe a half-a-page email bulletin every week, maybe in the beginning, until this emergency exists. And thereafter, it can taper down and things begin to settle down. And what is important is for the board of the independent directors to ask those questions, make sure that the questions have been asked, and at least in case of a litigation subsequently, if you can demonstrate that you did ask for these questions, therefore you are not lacking in your duty of care or duty of loyalty. Answers were not possible to be obtained. When answers are not there, not being superhumans, you could not expect us to have done anything differently than what we have actually done. Yeah, that's one exit. I'm talking about it from a purely legal liability point of view.
Yes.
But there is one more thing that people can do is to Damodaran raised this, and Narasimhan also mentioned this. While we talk about our employees, our key management personnel and this and that, what should we be doing with the supply chain people? That's what they mentioned. Have we taken care of them? That's one side of it. The other side of it is, God forbid if something goes wrong with a key supplier, do we have a backup? I mentioned earlier, have a succession or a backup plan for your senior executives, key executives, but at least for your key vendors, can we have something? And maybe you don't have it may be a proprietary supplier, and we may have no other alternative. If you close it down, you close down, right? But if it is not a proprietary product or service, can we explore alternatives? Even if it is not L1, if it is L2 or whatever it is, we can at least go to that person and say, can you help us at this time? All right, that kind of a thing one could, good management will always do that. And good board members, I think, should be assured that that's being done. Now, we don't expect them to go and do it of themselves, but we get assurances from time to time. And I always believe that board minutes should record these things, though many American lawyers advise people not to write too much in the board minutes, because that exposes you to what you are not considered. So they say if you generally say that, you can always say, we all discussed that, and this is a summary only. But I think in conditions like this, to demonstrate things were discussed, things were, the directors applied their mind and asked these questions. That might be a useful thing. I would also say that the audit committee of companies or any other suitable committee, can be the COVID committee, should ask for a review, if and when they can do it, of all the contractual obligations the companies, for example, I went through that very interesting decision, this Justice Singh from Delhi, very, very well written judgment, I thought that was. And so that kind of a situation, what kind of an obligation do we just say it is force majeure, and then we say we would have to pay, we will be excused, etc.? Or what will be correct thing to do, and what kind of legal counsel that one should be getting to protect the company to the extent that they can. And those are things which will need to be done. And I think this is a time when management will be so bothered about day-to-day management and keeping the company afloat. It's not the time to leave them alone to do all these things. I think the board, the audit committee, as suitable members of the board should take on that responsibility, not in an executive capacity, but at least keep reminding that these are things that we need to do and take outsource to the extent that you can. If you can't do it, outsource it to somebody, some competent people to take care of it from your side. I think anything that is humanly possible, you can expect the board of directors to do. And anything that is superhuman, it may not be reasonable to expect them to take care of.
Correct. Fair point, sir. Sir, I'm
just one related point. So Damodaran mentioned that in all this, the board is a custodian, to my mind, or a trustee in a legal sense for the shareholders, but in a social sense, they're also a trustee for the stakeholders in the company, the employees, the customers, the environment, and all that, whatever we do in the context. Every company must ensure at this time, and the board should try and do that, the communications by their own behavior perhaps, to ensure that the values and ethical standards that the company is committed to are not compromised during this period on any account. I think if business is lost, if something is not being done, the employees or the senior executives should not get the idea that we can cut corners and go and get something done so that we are not hauled up on this account. And I would also say that it's not very common in India still. The company's purpose, the reason for the company to exist, it's not the mission, it's not the vision, there's something more, that you have a purpose for the company to exist. That purpose is not lost sight of when being attacked by this kind of a pestilence or a so I think that I would say will be a good thing for the board to ensure at this time.
No, thank you, sir. I think while I think we're running out of time, I'm going to do one thing, which is to kind of look at one last question which is going on in everybody's mind, and this is probably arising out of work from home and everything being talked about in the digital manner. So, I mean, before we take the questions, I'm going to request each one of you to, please kind of tell us your views with respect to what is being talked about as a digital imperative to the corporate governance, and that various, policies, procedures, various superintendent-related issues, oversight-related issues can actually be discharged via the digital imperative as is being talked about. So, I mean, in the order with Professor to go with you, then to Doctor, and then to Sir, and in true sense, it's a respect and knighthood, sir, that I've kind of want to mention that. So please, with Professor Saab, this digital imperative, is it merely talk today, or is it something which is going to be there as a sustainability? And your concluding remarks. I would love to talk for next about 1 hour, because there are various things going on in this sector and in the minds of all the corporate executives today. But because of paucity of time, I think I'll have to draw a line. So I'm going to request on this digital imperative and your concluding remarks together.
Okay, thank you. I'll be brief, because I think you rightly say this is a subject which admits of considerable discussion, cannot be compressed, zipped in a 1 hour module. On the digital governance relating to corporations side, I think there are two things which I would like to mention. One is thanks to the technology improvements that have taken place in the last couple of decades, and still happening even as we speak, things which we could not dream of doing before, we are beginning to take it for granted now. Whether it is internet banking or online education or whatever it is, these are all these are happening.
Hello.
Which is all happening. So I think companies, the digital and technological advances that they're able to get, it has saved, it has improved, it has become, companies have become much more efficient and effective. And I think that's in the right direction. And COVID or no COVID, I think this cannot be stopped. And I think it should not be stopped. And I think we should go ahead. Even on this question of working from home, Damodaran mentioned the difficulties of many people, especially in a city like Bombay, where 800 square feet and 1,200 square feet are considered to be palatial accommodation. I mean, to expect people to have a separate study or office room, or all that is going to be difficult. But I think some of the people who are used to that anyway, and I think the family must have given up on them, and then they're sitting in a corner, whatever they have to do. But the risk of confidentiality being lost, risk of compromising confidentiality, the risk of data security, the risk of data theft, poaching, that's one thing which companies will have to be paying extra attention to. The advantages are many. Working from home, the disadvantages and the hurdles are equally there. Therefore, that's something that they will have to do. The related thing which people will have to think of is not only about their own security, even the medium that we use. As I said the other day, even Zoom, which we are using now, this is under a cloud. Okay, we don't know what is being captured where, and if a board is seriously discussing a competitor's situation and how to take advantage of that, whether that will be of value to somebody or not, So I have no answer. I am not a technology person. I hope somebody will come out with a good solution to the integrity of the data, to the extent assurance can ever be given. Like 100% assurance is out of question. So I think that is what I would say. A digital imperative is there. I don't think that we can, for example, without using the digital facility, we can't be having this meeting, this webinar. Okay. So, all right, this is not as confidential as some other thing that may be in a company. So that is, I would say, boards will have to certainly take attention to that. As a concluding remark, I would only just want to say one thing, and this is in the realm. I've been thinking about it for quite some time. We have always felt we blame the institution of independent directors for not being effective, not contributing. Where were the directors? What were they doing? We only talk about the cashew nuts and the cakes that they eat in the boardroom. We never bother about anything else. And they come into the forefront only when there is a scam and there is a big screamer headlines in the newspapers. Then we ask what were the directors doing, etc. I think some serious thought has to be given as not only to make the board independent, but also make sure that the independent voices that you get on the board do count.
Okay.
Okay. I think that is something. I think it was Einstein some decades ago. He said, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. Wow. So I guess one has to think, when people say, what is a good use? What's the use of governance? I mean, that's not something you realize that value only when there is a problem like this. How do you make the independent voices heard? And how do you, especially in a country like India, where concentrated shareholding or family holdings is the order of the day, how do you make sure that the promoter managements, the controllers, do see independent directors as a value addition and not as a nuisance, not as a policeman all the time? They may have a policing duties as well, but not always that. I mean, they also bring considerable value. I know independent directors think they bring value, but it is for the customer, who are the controlling shareholders, who have to be persuaded to believe that independent directors bring value. Therefore, please give them their voice, listen to them, and then accepting or not accepting is, your choice. Yeah, and that will be my concluding comment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr.
Yeah, I mean, digital imperative, in my understanding, is that digital technology is useful for transactional and workflow efficiencies, absolutely no doubt. That will contribute a lot and should be leveraged thoroughly well. And we have seen actually it's being used by several people already. Second thing is that in the corporate governance area, if you look at corporate governance from the point of view of board's participation in the governance processes, probably kicking up information to the board, yes, it can happen more efficiently, more elaborately, more promptly, more accurately, possibly. But then it can never be a substitute for boardroom deliberations for several reasons. In addition to the confidentiality issues, the way in which the communication that comes from the words, communication that comes to the body, etc., all that can be understood only when you are in the boardroom. And sitting on a screen and deliberating on a serious issue, I don't think it's going to be very efficient, at least for this generation of directors. Next generation, I do not know, but this generation is completely new for them. And therefore, we have to still go for the boardroom physical meetings. There's absolutely no doubt. So digital imperatives only for the purposes of efficiency in communication, efficiency in workflow, efficiency in the transactional front. That's my view. As a concluding remarks are concerned, the managements have to beat the resource myopia, look at the expertise that you've got at the board, tap it, and make use of it. For all you know, the director sitting on your board is sitting on multiple boards, and therefore learning from other companies can contribute to your company. And therefore it is for the management to now go back, instead of considering board as a burden on them, take it as a resource and tap them. That's going to make a huge difference to corporate welfare. Thank you.
Very well said, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Damodaran, sir,
I will make a very brief comment on the digital business, which is that you're either on the cloud or under a cloud. There is no other place. You can't hide. Okay. So, because speed, accuracy, objectivity, all of that is served better by technology than by the way that we used to conduct business. If you recognize that technology is a servant and not a master, you make progress in life. If you recognize technology as a master, then God bless you. That's all I can say as far as that area is concerned. To Dr. Narasimhan's point about physical meetings is absolutely right. This kind of a meeting cannot take away from a physical meeting, because you're a lawyer. I shouldn't be telling you this, but when I started my career as a magistrate, one of the lessons that I was told was that it's important to look at the demeanor of the witness in the witness box, because the High Court and the Supreme Court will only see the recorded evidence.
Okay.
You are the person that will see how he or she said what he or she said, which is more important. So even in the boardroom, as managements make presentations, you get to know what went behind those presentations. Did somebody hold a gun to the person's head? Does that person make that presentation believing in it himself or herself, or is it a kind of passive exercise? So that is something that I think we need to look at. I have 3 or 4 very brief comments, if you will. One is that Professor Bala mentioned the COVID committee. I would urge that we should not set up any more committees. The risk management committee of the board should be tasked to also function, to discharge the functions that the COVID committee has done. In fact, that is a committee which, one of the basic, let's say, gains of COVID also has gains, is that the risk management committee is finally coming into its own, rather than being the fifth committee with 4 being referred to in the Companies Act and this one coming much later, should have been there in the initial list. Companies will look at getting into newer businesses because that is the way to go. But in terms of, I mean, there have been very major failures. Satyam, for example, wanted to go into real estate companies as risk diversification from IT, and I think the world is wiser by now what risk diversification means when you move from one committee of that kind to another. There was a brief mention of what happens if some of your key functionaries are laid low by COVID, either temporarily or, God forbid, permanently. Some of the forward-looking companies have prepared very short-term succession plans that if somebody who is in an important position tomorrow tests positive and cannot come to office and work must go on, who will step into his or her shoes? That has been identified up to the second, the third levels in some of the forward-looking companies. I wanted to mention that the role of the board is also to look at the long term. So while managements are grappling with whatever they're grappling with, the board should look at a post-COVID situation. The managements can't adequately focus because they're putting out fire. So when you're putting out the fires, it's not the time to take long-term views or medium-term views. That's something that the board can do, survey the scene, look at where the economy is going, what are the sectors that are doing well, badly, how do you need to allocate resources. In fact, resource allocation is something which needs to get very, very serious attention at this time. You can't say that, okay, I will not take up a business because I don't know where the money is. You must decide if the business is good, how do you find that money? That is going to be important. There was one other question to us that you mentioned in your mail. Do you want me to take it up now or later? Which is, should we have half-yearly accounting or quarterly accounting?
Sure, sir, please go ahead.
I will touch on it straight away. The reason I'm doing that is that that question is music to my ears. In the year 2008, in the ISB, I mentioned that I am looking forward to a day when we will go to half-yearly accounts. There were no takers at that time. They said it will be seen as retrograde, etc. I have continued to plow a lonely furrow till then, and happy to see Mr. Anand has written an article on this. And if he is participating, it might interest him to know that in addition to trying to canvass support for this, 4 years ago in a lead-in piece in our monthly newsletter, we addressed the question whether quarterly accounts are boon or bane. And in fact, we said that it promotes short-termism. It is not good for all categories of companies, especially infrastructure where nothing major changes in a quarter. And that good jurisdictions have lived with half-yearly accounts without any problem. And this is actually to cater to one segment of people, namely analysts, who had to be kept busy. In fact, in that newsletter, we had, I will take names, Mr. Y.M. Devasthali, a veteran of the corporate scene, argue that nothing is gained by quarterly accounts. And we had the chief executive of a stock exchange. He said he looks forward to the day when there will be daily disclosures, not quarterly disclosures. So clearly, I am with with the lobby, if I can call it that, which will press for half-yearly accounts so that managements can focus on doing the work rather than in financial engineering and postponement of bad news till the next quarter and stuff like that. Thank you, Suhas.
No, thank you very much, sir. I think for only one reason I would consider half-yearly return is the abbreviation on the quarterly statement.
QSQT.
QSQT. It's Qayamat se Qayamat tak for everybody. And Having said that, we have almost about 25 minutes now, 25 to 30 minutes, where we can take some of the questions. We may not be able to take all the questions, but I will undertake to circulate them across three of you and get the answers of those questions which have remained unanswered. JD, would you like to look at the QA panel and look at the questions?
Most certainly, and thank you so much. That was a very enriching session. And so, like you said, we have more questions to answer than the time available. We'll try and cover as many as possible. I think the first question was by Mr. Venkatesh. I think that has been answered already. It was about the 6-monthly accounting. We have covered a lot of ground as people posted their questions, but there's one question that I'd like to highlight over here. How to ensure promoter director disclose all facts before the board of members? One important document that will reveal the performance of corporate is cash flow. And during COVID-19, we all know cash is king is the mantra. So therefore, how to ensure that all of this is shared with the board members for taking an informed view of functioning?
See, JD, I would request Professor Bala from this perspective. This is a question from Mr. Venkatesh to say that, isn't it good to get the cash flow statement as your primary information and move around it?
I think underlying this question is, as I see it, two assumptions. One is the promoters cannot be trusted to disclose everything. They only disclose what they think needs for the board to know. It may be true. I'm not saying that it is not entirely true. How do you force a promoter to disclose? I mean, if I can just relate this question to the previous question Mr. Daman answered so well on the half-yearly account. The only point in favor of concurrent accounting and reporting, not to the public necessarily, even for management internally, I mean, you need to have some kind of a financial reporting for decisions to be taken. And this quarterly, when it was, I agree, it's not the right thing. I am in favor of discontinuing quarterly thing. It has got more negatives than positives. But it does bring a discipline to the organization in terms of completing their accounts one way or the other.
One way or the other, sir.
Well, I mean, I went into a general term, but I agree that it is subject to interpretations. I would say that the cash flow is an important document. The board should, in their meeting, I would be surprised if companies do not mention, even in the briefest outlines, what the cash flow situation is. If it's not, I think the board should ask for that information. And we may find, like in Satyam's case, as Damodaran mentioned earlier, cash was not flowing anywhere because there's no cash to flow included. So it is important. The CFO of Satyam at that time, Mr. Vadlamani, I think if I remember his name correctly.
Yes.
We lost him. Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, we lost him. JD, you want to move to the next question? We'll get him back once he's...
Jaydeep, you're mute. You're mute.
The next question is actually very interesting and a segue into our next webinar, which starts in another 30 minutes, along with, in partnership with BSc, with Mr. Kushru Balsara and the SEBI General Manager Pradeep Ramakrishnan. But the question is from Lata Chari. She asks, how should corporate disclosures be improved so that all external stakeholders can understand performance and prospects better? How can disclosures and accountability be balanced in such an environment? Mr. Damodaran, would you like to go first?
Okay, let me state one eternal truth, which none of us take seriously, but it is the truth. The truth is that language was given to man to conceal his thought, not to express it. And disclosures that are in complex sentences are meant to conceal information from those that try to extract information. I think there should be demystification of disclosures. State them in simple sentences that you can understand easily. More standards, more accounting standards, things of that kind, that is not the answer. What is happening is that something goes wrong somewhere and a new regulation gets written or a new accounting standard gets prescribed. And I'm fond of saying this, that if there is no major weakness in the system, don't write another regulation. Because murder gets committed, you don't amend section 300 and 302 of the Penal Code every time a murder gets committed. That's not necessary. You look at your regulatory framework, the prescriptive arrangements in totality, and see what needs to be communicated in what manner, and that by stating too much, you do not hide what you're actually expected to communicate. More simplicity is required. In fact, along with a lawyer colleague, I am associated with a project which is to get existing regulations written in simple sentences. And we have entrusted this to law students of some major law schools. We've started with SEBI regulations. Take the regulations, write them in simple sentences. Is more disclosure required? You see, there is a tree at the bottom of which is data. Then there is information, and then there is knowledge, and then there is wisdom. All data is not information. If you get a lot of stuff that lands before you, how much you read? Take the offer documents for mutual funds. You're put on notice that you're supposed to read all of that. Will you actually read all of that before you make a small investment in a mutual fund? I don't think anybody has the time. So I think some of these things we should revisit to see what is important and what needs to be communicated in what manner. It's a major project that needs to be undertaken, not tinkering with any existing regulations.
Rightly said, Mr. Damodaran. Dr. Narasimhan, any comment on this question?
Yeah, I think I fully agree with Damodaran sir on this point. I mean, disclosures, let's say COVID has impacted the company by, say, 48 crores. This is information fully disclosed. How does it really help anybody at all? The point here is the management fully alert to the COVID implications? Are they taking what's all is supposed to be taken care to see that the company is resurrected and going back to post-COVID or pre-COVID situation? That's what exactly we are supposed to know from a disclosure, not necessarily the tons and tons of data. Therefore, I mean, if you look at, the question is very interesting question. I was just looking at these disclosures made on NSE before 20th of May and after 20th of May. Before 20th of May, there were no disclosures at all, hardly any. Post 20th disclosures, as sir said rightly, the language was used to camouflage more than disclose much. So we are aware, we are assessing, we'll come back to you in due course of the kind of example that a language used. Therefore, are the managements fully aware of what's happened with them? Have they assessed it fully? I mean, are we as an external stakeholders, are we in a hurry to ask information? As sir said rightly, when somebody is putting the fire down, are you asking him to say why the fire has come in the first place? Or you have to ask him to put down the fire? I think disclosures have a place to go, no doubt about that. What is important is management alert and aware of what's happening with it, and are they working on it? So long as we're getting this kind of satisfaction, probably investors should be happy and satisfied about it.
Thank you. The next question comes from Dr. Amita Sehgal, And it's a very interesting one. I'm sure will require a lot more time to answer. But there are many people who are talking about this. The question is, what is the responsibility of the board to take care of employees as an important stakeholder during these times with impending retrenchments and downsizing?
You want me to take that?
Sure, please, sir.
Okay. The compulsions of business might require downsizing to be undertaken by companies. In an ideal world, they would have retained everyone, promoted all those that are due for promotion, given increments and other additional payments wherever necessary. This is not an ideal world. If the company has to survive in the long term, there will be some tightening of belts, there will be some reduction in salaries, there will be some jobs that will become surplus. This is an unfortunate economic reality. The landing must be made as soft as possible for such people by the company. See how you can help them in a post-COVID restructuring situation. Some companies might shut down some lines of business. What happens to those people? Obviously, they are not going to remain on the workforce. But while they are on the workforce, and this is a very, very important question, while they are your employees, you must take care. When you are letting them go, see that you're doing it because you have no choice in the interest of the company. Not that you don't like somebody, it's a good opportunity to throw out someone. Don't look at it that way. And those that are going out, have counseling, see whether you can advise them what they need to do. You will see significant downsizing in companies. That's a hard fact of life post-COVID.
Thank you, sir.
Next question.
The next question is from Ramesh Sharma, ex-IPS Executive Director at Legasis. He says there is bound to be asymmetry of information due to the fact that requisite information may not be available or the information may need to be verified. You all touched upon this during the course of the webinar. But the question is that with this lack of information, how is the board of directors expected to carry out their task diligently, and what is the way out?
Yeah,
I think
you go. Yeah, okay.
Simple is, actually, sir has said several times already, seek the information. And you may not be able to get immediately, but management will have to go back and give. I mean, the point is, are we asking the right questions? Professor Bala was also saying the same thing. Ask the right question so that management will get the information for you. It's not that you're going to take a decision right away. You are here to, as supervision, oversight responsibility, you need to ask the right question. Probably board will go and fetch it for you, and management will go and fetch it for you. It's not that every information is readily available and they will just pluck it and give it to you.
No, I heard you say the question is from a Legasis official. So I hope there is no insider questioning being regulated by any external regulator. But
no, sir.
That said, I think, no, I was just making a light-hearted comment.
No,
I think the board, the board comprises people who are reasonably experienced, and if they take their work seriously, they will know how much they can get in this situation. They will know what to follow up on if information is not forthcoming, and ensure that that which is most important is shared with the board so that you can decide how to deal with the current crisis as well as plan for the long term. Take, for example, innovation. In difficult times, the things that will get buried in boards and in companies is innovation will not get discussed. You will not see strategy getting as much of a lift because you're dealing tactically with the problem on hand. You will not see, for example, more engagement with employees on matters that are not being dealt with now so as to get something from them on what the company can do going forward. All of that will be parked temporarily because you have enough on your plate and there's only so much you can do. I don't think we should be judgmental about this. Leave it to the boards. They will ask what they need to ask. They will get what they can get. and they will act on what they get in the interest of the company.
Yeah, sir, if pardon me for interjecting, JD. I'm going to request for one last question because we're running out of time, which is question from Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti. And Shailesh Bhai is kind of, you know, interestingly, very clearly saying, has the board role now evolved to disrupting or protecting business models? And then he goes on to ask, is the concept of promoter now losing ground? I know it's a kind of a question that needs tremendous deliberation. I understand that, but if I wouldn't have taken Shailesh Bhai's question, I think he may have felt bad about it. So I must raise this up here.
May I make a brief response?
Sir, please.
The second part of the question, what is it on promoters?
No, is the concept of promoter losing ground in this situation in today's circumstance?
Concept.
The concept of promoter itself.
You know, if COVID-19 actually makes the concept of promoter lose ground, it would have given a significant positive impact for the corporate sector. Because for years, and we are, as you know well, one of the few jurisdictions where we define promoters. We define it differently in different regulations. Even that convergence hasn't happened. There is a proposal to amend the regulations in order to see who ceases to be a promoter. But the best is to dump it, because this had some validity at some point of time. And if COVID does that, if it reduces the relevance, so be it. I think we should applaud. As for boards being disruptive, etc., hyperactive boards are also a problem, if you ask me. I think what boards need to ask is, are we okay continuing the current business in the current manner? If not, are we okay continuing the current business in a different manner? Otherwise, are we okay abandoning this business and taking up some business? Because it's easy for companies, larger companies, to say that we are not going to be disrupted. We are the disruptors. Very good. The problem is you have a legacy. It's not easy to throw it away. The startup who is writing on a clean slate is better equipped to be a disruptor rather than the company which has been around for 5 decades doing more of the same and then suddenly saying, no, we are going to disrupt. Be prepared for disruption. If you can disrupt, do disrupt, but don't expect every company to disrupt their own business model. Self-disruption is good up to a point.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot. JD,
It's fine.
JD, you are on mute.
Sorry, I was talking to again. Sorry about that. I don't think we have time for any more questions. We have made a note of the questions that we couldn't answer. We'll circulate it and solicit your answers. But I guess it's time to move into closing comments. We couldn't get Professor Bala back on. He has some network issues. But Dr. Narasimhan, Mr. Damodaran, closing comments, Suhas, and then we can wrap.
No, nothing from my side. It's been an interesting learning experience for past 1.5 hours now. And I would want it to go on and on, but I know it can't. So nothing from my side, JD.
I think we've already given closing comments earlier already. It's a time when I think the managements have to look at boards as resources, ask them, take their guidance, and possibly they have to work as a team. While boards have to ensure that they continue their oversight responsibilities, but at the same time supportive, empathetic, and play with the management.
I'll make a brief comment, if I may, which is stay safe, stay healthy, be positive, and be happy. Happiness is the best therapy for all illnesses.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a very great and invigorating session. Recording of this would be made available on YouTube and circulated later. Please do join us for our next webinar, which is on the Regulation 30 of the SEBI LODR notification that was issued. Thank you again. Stay safe. Have a great evening. Thank you, sirs.